Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Vlog, where we discuss activity that goes on here with the BuzWeaver channel. That includes things like current events, headlines that are in the news, social media, technology, and items of interest that come up during the week that allow us to have a little bit of a dialogue. I want to thank all you guys for your continued likes, shares, and comments. As a matter of fact, I would reach out to you guys and suggest that you share this information with your friends and those on your social media, as it does help out the channel. Along with, if you are new to the channel and or a frequent viewer, I would encourage both of you guys now to click on that watermark down there in the bottom right hand corner to subscribe, along with clicking that notification bell. That way you guys will know when the Friday Vlogs are available, along with additional content that's here on the channel. This weekend here in the United States, we had some rather challenging, difficult, and tragic activities, as many of you are probably aware of the incidents that took place in El Paso, Texas, along with Dayton, Ohio. Now, this particular topic and or segment is not going to pertain to those incidents directly. We're going to be talking about what the president said in regards to their concerns and what they may be addressing in relation to these events. Now, for me personally, we'll go more into this here in a moment, but what I wanted to focus on, of course, is the fact that gaming has been mentioned as part of the contributing factor to these incidents, and I completely and utterly and totally disagree with that, because there has been no evidence that I have heard in the last few days, particularly involving these two individuals, that remotely suggest, hints, or implies that gaming had anything to do with it. And what we're going to be doing here is referring to the American Psychological Association. So I'm going to get right into it right now, and then I'll go into a little bit of a comment afterwards. So, from the American Psychological Association, violent video game play is linked to increased aggression in players, but insufficient evidence exists about whether the link extends to criminal violence or delinquency, according to a new American Psychological Association task force report. Now, it's important to note here that we're currently in another moral panic when it comes to this. Now, we saw this in the 80s and 90s growing up, and that was, of course, both gaming and music were contributing to, then, at least back in the 80s and 90s, to suicide, depression, and other types of activities, because we didn't see these level of events happen like we saw in Dayton and El Paso in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't until 1999, I believe it was, that we had the Columbine situation happen. So some of this research, and I'm going to link all this down here for you guys in the published section, and it's probably why, I mean, as far as like all this context, part of this is probably why a lot of the talking heads and even the president and others have gone into video games, because it is kind of a convenient general item that they can address and bring up to kind of pacify people. And we're going to talk about that methodology here in a minute. So scientists have investigated the use of violent video games for more than 2 decades, but to date there is very limited research addressing whether violent video games cause people to commit acts of criminal violence, said Mark Applebaum, PhD task force chair. And it's important to remember here now from the American Psychological Association that, as I mentioned, they have been researching this, as they just said here, over 2 decades, at least from the content that I'm going to share with you. It's the research from 1996. But they further go on to recommend from the American Psychological Association that public officials and news media should avoid stating explicitly or implicitly that criminal offenses were caused by violent video and or video games. Now, the reason I mention this is because we're in a very sensitive climate right now. And when the authorities, when government or people in positions of authority have somehow exhausted solutions, exhausted arguments, exhausted answers to society's questions, then they go into a blame mode. And this is not particularly for one particular political side or another political side. It has to do with just human nature and our particular ways we approach things when we're frustrated and can't find answers or solutions to particular problems. We look to outside sources and say, see, because of this or because of that, these particular incidents are happening. And I'm going to have to disagree with the president on this particular issue in violent video games, as well as I disagreed with the repeal of net neutrality. This is a situation that has evolved, and we have seen this happen in the 80s and 90s, and there isn't any evidence that suggests that video games in and of themselves facilitate this. And I heard all these talking heads say video games cause a sense of desensitization, and that these individuals are involved in activity that kind of devalues human life and these sorts of things. And I think that's extraordinarily hyperbolic language. What this really tells me, and probably tells many of you who are subscribers here to the channel who are gamers, that these individuals really aren't aware of what they're talking about. Because when it comes to certain games, and many of them, it requires group cooperation. It requires the interactivity of players to be able to get along, achieve objectives, achieve goals, interact with one another in a cooperative manner. And so it completely throws out this whole idea that video games are manifesting and generating a mindset among individuals to go out and commit things out in the real world. And here's the thing. Video games have always been stigmatized. There is this stereotypical mindset that video gamers are kind of homebound playing their games and they're not interacting out in the community. As a matter of fact, how many times have we heard commercials, TV and radio suggest to people to encourage their children to put down the tablets and put down the game pads and go outside and what was it? One of the commercials was something about go out and adventure, you know, like go to local parks and hiking trails and things like that. So we can see right here that in a situation when it comes to gaming, these individuals are not out creating mischief, right? The bread and circuses, going back to Rome when they had the Colosseum, to try to get people essentially distracted and keep them out of mischief and other activity that could be going on, to kind of in a way to reduce crime. As a matter of fact, it has been argued that not only has video games helped reduce crime in certain areas, but the internet itself has also helped reduce crime in certain areas. Now, I'm not going to go into the statistics and data of that in particular, but nonetheless, the idea that video games will be contributing to this level of violence is really unfounded. Even some of the games that they mentioned, for example, like Fortnite, you know, developers go into these games with ideas on how they can change certain perspectives and attitudes towards types of gaming. And Fortnite in particular is a very cartoony-ish type environment. You know, it's definitely kind of a sci-fi, science fiction environment that has interesting costumes and unique costumes and particular weapons that don't necessarily associate with reality. Now, I know that I cover Battlefield 5 here on the channel. Now, I've not gone really into Battlefield 5 specifically, but I do video shorts on Twitter and on my social media. So I always encourage you guys to follow me on those platforms to see the video shorts, which I have not posted in the last several days because of the sensitivity of this particular topic. But I am in disagreement with the president and the administration and others, particularly the talking heads, that video games are contributing to or are part of this problem. And we have seen it since the 80s and the 90s and even into the 2000s, as these reports have said, and I will link them below, that there is no particular evidence that video games promote or encourage this type of behavior. So I wanted to mention that to you guys and bring that up because it's so important, because many of you guys who subscribe, if you're watching the Friday Vlogs, are gamers here on the channel. And of course, guys, you can find all that information down in the published section below. We are perhaps reaching the apex of the culture war, information war, moral panic. Now, it could be said that the activities that happened in El Paso and Dayton have brought all of this to the front and center attention of individuals here in America, because anytime the media has the opportunity and the platform to reach more people, as these types of events do, the more we see the injection of ideological warfare and ideological activity in trying to influence a society. And one of my biggest concerns, and something that we have talked about here on the channel, is how not only social media and or the media, but how the tech giants have been affecting a lot of what goes on within our society and how they have approached these things. And we've talked about this even as YouTube content creators or social media in general, how individuals have been banned, deplatformed for having wrongthink and or not agreeing with the establishment, which has been established by social media, the media, and the tech giants. But this week we saw a flurry of tweets from President Trump as it refers to Google and their activity, because as we all know and has been exhausted for the last 3 years, we had the Mueller report, which was the staple of the mainstream media to be able to perpetuate their continual bombardment of the president, trying to turn him into a one-dimensional villain. And as we just talked about in our last segment, when individual groups and people and authorities run out of good arguments, when they run out of information, when they run out of solutions, when they run out of answers, they go to a blame game. And we have seen this over and over again, particularly when it comes to any time what it appears to be either Trump's victory or victories within certain political realms, how Russia may be involved in influencing things. But the reality is the influence is coming from mainstream media and even from the tech giants. As a matter of fact, the reason many of these organizations and groups are so angry at the president is not only do they not have the same ideological and worldview attitude, but the fact that the president has the most powerful platform in the world where he can go out and reach and talk to all the people within the United States and the world, which is exactly what his detractors want to be able to do. They want that influence. They want that power to be able to sway and influence individual people, and it is irritating Trump detractors to no avail or to no extent. And here's the thing that I wanted to talk about, because we saw from President Trump mentioning this, and of course we've talked about this here as well. On Monday, Fox News aired a Fox and Friends interview with ex-Google engineer Kevin Kreinke. Now, remember, we have heard from other platform designers and coders and other individuals talking about the bias that goes on within some of these tech giants. But what I saw this from originally was from President Trump's tweets, as he linked Lou Dobbs from the Fox Business Channel as he was talking to Kevin Kreinke. So, who said Google had a problem with anti-conservative bias on its platform and within the company, and that he was fired because of it. Now, you can read into the article, and he explains like what was going on or concerns that he had with the company as it pertained to bias, and how it took quite some time for these things to be fixed. And we remember in the last week's Friday vlog, we talked about Tulsi Gabbard suing Google because when she was at the height of her interest, or when people were interested in looking up her information, she and her team then went out and bought a bunch of advertisement and other items to help promote her channel so that she would appear at higher levels within the search, but that Google actually suppressed it for several hours. And of course, she's suing them for $50 million, which may have been the amount that they had paid for all that, who knows. When President Trump won in 2016, Google executives went up on stage right away and cried, literally tears streaming down their faces over the fact that President Trump won. Kreinke said in the Fox News interview, okay, that's with Lou Dobbs, they vowed that it would never happen again. And they want to use all of the power and all of the resources that they have to control the flow of information to the public and make sure that President Trump loses in 2020. So here we have 3 years of the Mueller investigation, Russia, and the concerns about some influence from the Russian boogeyman. And in reality, we have here the biggest of the search engines. I think it's 92%, I've heard quoted quite often, 92% or even 98% of the Google searches or searches on browsers are Google related. And we have seen the manipulation of Google and the searches, particularly going back to 2016 with Hillary Clinton. As a matter of fact, SourceFed actually had their video removed when they were demonstrating how this was actually happening on Google, but not on the other browsers. It was completely shut down. And how in the world could a more left-leaning organization like SourceFed back then be so critical of Hillary Clinton? They got in all kinds of trouble for that, and even had to make kind of a retraction and a second video to that, where they go into the fact that, oh, well, we were contacted by Google, and Google said this, Google said that. So basically, Google gave them a way out of that situation because, of course, they're all on the same team. But back in 2016, we had a very similar incident that took place, and this was during like a meeting, during a minutes meeting that was also recorded. And we also have email exchanges within Google of particular bias and censorship, not to mention the fact that we're already seeing it anyway in general. Most people here are pretty upset and pretty sad. This goes back to 2016. Google co-founder Sergey Brin says, as the meeting begins, "I find this election deeply offensive, and I know many of you do too. It's a stressful time, and it conflicts with many of our values." And what's values being subjective? "I think it's a good time to reflect on that. So many people apparently don't share the values that we have." What exactly are those values? Because I saw Tim Pool yesterday on one of his videos talk about a flurry of articles. He said he read over 66 different articles, and everything pertained to the castigation and attack on President Trump. Because right now what's happening, guys, is that the media is riding off of this event, or these events that have happened in El Paso and Dayton. There is kind of a heightened tension right now that they're trying to feed off of. Like Rahm Emanuel said, you know, back many years ago, never let a crisis go to waste. And unfortunately, as terrible of a phraseology as that is kind of the mindset operation that is going on right now. And that is, the media has the attention of the people, which is what they always want. And now they want to kind of ramp everything up. You know, they want to put their people out front and center stage, like Robert Francis, or Beto, as he likes to be referred to. Being out there trying to make these particular, sometimes rather unrelated statements to the actual events, but to perpetuate this emotional rise, this continual information war, this cultural mindset and moral panic that's going on, and directed at one individual person to say, this person is the cause of this particular problem, and these are the results of this particular one person. Yet at the same time, we still have these same governments and administrators and others suggesting that it's something else. But the concern here is that as we get closer to the 2020 election, we're probably going to see more of this censorship, more of this control, more of this authoritarianism. And what's curious is, if we look at like the mindset of social media or the mainstream media, these were groups of individuals who were for free speech. These were the people who were for fairness and equality and the ability for individuals and independent thinkers to be able to express themselves. And now these individuals have suddenly started embracing censorship. They've actually started embracing warhawk type mentality as well when it comes to certain things that are going on and within the military. A very rapid and unusual change, maybe somewhat predictable based upon just the atmosphere, right, of the desire and want to manipulate and influence individuals because they feel so defeated by what happened in 2016. And so we see this just continuing rising and rising in escalation. Now, different commentators have different ideas on this. Is this the beginning of some form of civil war? Is this some form of continued escalation going to spill over and we could potentially see more of this? Or what exactly is the direction that we're going to be going in, and what will ultimately happen after all this starts to unfold, and what is going to happen in the 2020 election? And what I would say to you guys is, I'd reach out to you guys and say, hey, if you like the content you see here on the channel, because it is possible that this particular video will be demonetized, but overall we see a level of censorship that is going on because the platforms are trying to become more family friendly. They want there to be more positive content, and we can all understand and agree that it is much better to have a positive attitude and a positive outlook on the world than for the different tribes to be battling back and forth, which is what is predominant on, for example, Twitter and other social media platforms. I'm sure you guys, if you spend any time on your Facebook, can see the levels of discourse and political conversations that are going on. But guys, I'm getting kind of long-winded here, but nonetheless, I did want to point that out, that President Trump was effectively going after Google, and we can see that bias now. There is, and the news articles kept saying no evidence or no information that substantiates what President Trump says. That's ridiculous. We have quotes. We have emails. We have individuals out there in social media that are being affected by this. We can show this information, you know, like Veritas has done. Veritas had a lot of issues because of them actually revealing what's actually going on. So I want to reach out to you guys and thank you for your continued support of the channel. And of course, click that like button and share this information on your own social media to get this type of information out to people so that they can be aware of what is going on. And I will include links down in the published section below so you guys can look further into it. And that's going to wrap it up for this Friday vlog, guys. I am so grateful and thankful for your guys' participation here on the channel. And it was a rather kind of a heavy topic week this week, but it just had to be done. I tried to keep it as light of heaviness, if that makes any sense, as I could, just to be able to present this information to you. And of course, there were areas that I would have liked to have explored or maybe even answered or gone into, because of course, when these type of events happen, you know, people come on Facebook and ask me all types of questions about the Second Amendment, firearms and things like that. And of course, those I was just really not wanting to get into that this particular go around. But nonetheless, guys, I want to thank all of you and of course encourage you now to click that like button, as well as you see the obligatory channel icon appearing right there on the screen to subscribe, along with clicking that notification, guys, so you will know when the Friday vlogs are available. And I will see you guys right there behind the camera next week.